Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to Finding Certainty. It's our favorite day of the week. Here at Finding Certainty, we recently changed the day from Friday to Wednesdays. I'm going to probably keep mentioning that for the first couple of weeks as more and more listeners figure this out and meet us here in the middle of the week instead of right at the end. You know, as we talked about it, we did research, we got feedback from listeners and so forth. More people said they could really use a boost in the arm halfway through the week rather than when they're almost at the weekend, because by the end of the week, you know, we've all heard TGIF. We're already feeling pretty good because the weekend is upon us. But as we're going through our week, we're looking for ways to get through the week, to get over the hump, as it were. And that's why we've decided to do the show here on Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So thanks for being with us this morning. Look forward to this all week long. I really enjoy both the monologues that I do on the first Wednesday of each month and the interviews that I do the rest of the month. Here on Finding Certainty, we're constantly looking for guests and specialists and gurus out there who are helping their clients and their friends and their loved ones to find more certainty in their lives and businesses. Our guest today, Yvette Simmons-Payne, is doing exactly that. Yvette, thanks for being with us on Finding Certainty this morning. We're really looking forward to getting to know you better.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited. You know, we're recent introductions. We haven't been friends for too long, although I felt like I've known you forever. We talked, what was it? Well, only 4 or 5 hours the first time, right? But
to about 4 hours.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying our relationship and what I'm learning from you. We had you come in and talk to our whole team just a week ago, so you have to deal with me 2 weeks in a row. But what you are doing is extraordinary, and I'm excited to get into it here on the show today. So I always start Finding Certainty out by sharing 2 reasons why I've invited this specific guest to be with us today. And the first reason is that Yvette is really an accomplished business owner. She's got a really amazing story, which we're going to hear some of today. But she's a great example of somebody who has continued to reinvent herself, to recalculate, and continued to look for ways to not just be successful as a professional and as an entrepreneur, but to make a difference in people's lives. Throughout her career, she's looked for ways to make a difference in those around her. And that's exactly what she's doing now with her business, the Codemasters. The second reason is that business, the methodology, the science that she's going to share with you today, or the system, it's something that can not just help you in your business. It can help you in multiple areas of your life. It can, she'll tell you the story, but it can save relationships. It can help you in your parenting relationship with your kids, with your family, with colleagues, with customers. And ultimately, it can create a great deal more certainty in your communication with those relationships that are so important to you. So that's what the Codemasters is all about. If those goals, those objectives are important to you, I think you're going to enjoy today's time with us here on Bold Brave TV and Finding Certainty. So, Yvette, we always start out with sort of a stroll down memory lane. Our listeners enjoy hearing a little bit about your story. So, briefly, if you can, tell us where you're from, maybe where you grew up, and a little bit about your growing up years, getting into your professional life. Just tell us the recap. Who is Yvette Simmons-Payne?
I am me. So I was born in South Florida in Coral Gables, raised most of my young until I was about 13 in Florida somewhere. Then my dad was transferred to Ohio. My parents divorced for the second time right after we moved to Ohio, and me and my mom moved to Missouri. And we, from there, I just kind of decided that it was time for me to branch out and become my own person. I left home when I was 15. I stayed with inside the city that my mom lived in until I was 18. But I told her that I wanted to be on my own. I was going to school half a day. I was working half a day. Pretty much already taking care of myself. I thought I'm ready. So she gave me
So
that.
you kind of emancipated yourself. Sounds like. I mean, you were
Yeah.
from 15 to 18. That's pretty young. My youngest son went through sort of the same thing. He was 17 when he left. Not as young as you, but he didn't want to live with my ex-wife and his stepdad. He wanted to be back in the city. They were living out in those sticks about 30 miles from town. And he packed up one day and moved and literally emancipated himself, if you will. Went and lived with his sister up in Portland instead of down in Brookings, Oregon, where they were. And that's a big step. That's a big step for. I mean, I think that it kind of gives me a little bit of insight into who you are, because to leave home at 15 and finish your schooling, work part time, that's impressive.
Once I moved out, I worked full time because I
You
had
did
enough
okay.
to pay for the car, and I had a roommate. And but yeah, I've been a worker bee since the day I was born. I in the fifth grade, I already had my own first little business. I figured out how to make cinnamon toothpicks from scratch, and I took them to school with me every day, and I sold them for a nickel a piece because back then your lunches were free, but you had to buy your milk. So every child came to school with a nickel on them, and most of the kids didn't want milk, but they would sure love a cinnamon toothpick. So I thought it was kind of interesting because it was the first week I did it. I had probably about a third of the school, middle school, and I was like, I don't understand. Everybody loves cinnamon toothpicks. Why isn't everybody buying one from me? And so this little bubble above my head went off. I said, well, ask them why they're not buying from you. And I went, sounds logical. So I started asking a few people who weren't buying from me, and they said that it was because they were too hot. So I asked my mom for two more Tupperware dishes, and I cut the cinnamon oil with some olive oil and made them not quite so strong. And then I was selling to just about everybody. I was making $250 a week in nickels in the fifth grade. And
That's
my mom made me
incredible.
count. She
I mean,
helped me
that's a
take it to
lot
the
of money
bank
for
and roll it all.
yeah. That's a lot of money for a fifth grader, and
Actually, at that time,
that
I
was
mean,
a few years ago.
2 years ago, it was more than she was bringing home after taxes.
That's amazing. All right,
That was
so when you started to work full time, you moved out. Were you finishing your high school degree at the time, or diploma, or what were you doing then?
yeah, I was in the my junior year, or actually my sophomore year of high school when I moved out, and I finished. Um, Actually, I did not graduate because um, an odd story, but my freshman year I had gone to a private school in St. Louis, and they were much stricter. And they, like 1 year class, they gave you a half a credit, whereas most of the public schools give you a full credit for your class. And I had
Really?
taken a lot of my, yeah, I had taken a lot of my mandated classes. I'd taken French, English, biology, algebra. I had taken a lot of my required courses. So when I
Right.
transferred the next year to a public school, they said, well, you know what? We're going to give you the credits as if you had taken them here because you passed them all, you got good grades and everything. So we're just going to give you the credits as if you had taken them here. So that made me way above like where I needed to be is credit wise, which is why they offered me the OWE program. And I took it because I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds like me all day long. And come my
And
senior year,
what's the OWE?
oh, occupational work experience.
Okay.
So they would let you go to school half a day and work half a day, um, if you qualified for that program, which I did. And come my senior year, when they sent all my stuff into the state to get my diploma, the
Mm-hmm.
state wrote them back and said you weren't allowed to change her credits from the private school. You have to give her the credits as if that she actually got. So now all of a sudden I didn't have enough credits to graduate, and they told me I was going to have to go to school for another year and a half, and I was like, yeah, that's not happening. So I got my mom on the phone and explained to her what was going on, and she told the dean, the principal, look, she's 17 years old, she doesn't live at home. If she wants to quit, she can quit, and I can't stop her. And so I quit, and about a year and a half later, I went and took my GED, and I passed with flying colors. They actually said that if I wanted to go to college, I wouldn't have to take the SAT test to get into any college that I wanted to go to, that my scores were high enough on my GED
Right.
that it would substitute for.
So Yvette, you remind me of my mother, Susan Laing. She's a high school graduate, or excuse me, a high school dropout with a master's degree. She went on to teach honors English, and she ran the honors English writing program at Brigham Young University for several years. And so, our paths take all different forms, right? You went back, got your GED. I don't think my mom ever did. I don't think she ever got actually graduated, but at the time
Yeah.
she went to college
It was
early.
to drop out if the school had done their homework
Yeah,
and
yeah,
after they could do what they were doing. I would have taken whatever I had to take to make sure that I had enough credits to graduate with my class. But I didn't feel
sure,
like I should be punished for their lack of research and knowing their job.
right.
So
Well,
I
and to my point, don't you think I do believe it's a principle of certainty in our lives that we do take different paths. There's different courses, there's hurdles, there's disappointments, there's things that are a surprise to us or even a devastation. And the key is to keep going, right? Even when we fail, they say we should fail forward. And that's obviously what you did. You went on to work full time, get into your career, and now you're a business owner who is blessing a lot of lives. So let's jump forward a little bit and talk about the crux of your career. I know you've been very involved with the chambers of commerce there in the area where you are. You're in the San Antonio, Texas area. Um, let's talk about your professional career. You went from high school, working full time, and then what brought you to where you are today? How did you decide on the path that took you to today?
well, um, the first thing I did was waitressing because it was good money, and you didn't have to work like 80 hours a week to make the money. You could work 30 to 35 to 40 hours a week and make enough money to live. And then I got tired of always having to work when my friends were off and being off when my friends were working. So I broke into the office world as a receptionist for an electrical company in West Palm Beach, Florida. And it's really funny because I had been interviewing like nonstop and I didn't have any experience, right? Because I've been waitress. And I went into the Star Electric. I'll never forget it. And there's the two guys, the owner and his right hand man, were interviewing me together. And they're like, yeah, well, we like you, but we're really looking for somebody with more experience. And I was like, okay. And as I walked out the door, I was just so frustrated that as I walked out the door in disgust, I said, well, how is anybody ever supposed to get experience if nobody will, open the door and let my foot in?
Right.
And I just walked out. And
We've
by the
all
time
asked
I
ourselves that question, haven't we? Haven't we all asked ourselves that question at some point in our lives? Like, how am I supposed to get experience if no one will give me experience, right?
yeah, and I was like, this was like probably the 25th interview that had told me that. And I was just at my wits' end. I figured I'd already not gotten the job, so I guess it couldn't hurt. But actually, when I got home, there was on my answering machine, there was a message saying that they were going to let me have my foot in the door. So I started working for them as a receptionist. I worked really closely with their CPA, and she taught me how to do a lot of the bookkeeping, like accounts payable, accounts receivable, balancing the checkbook, invoicing, matching up, and making sure that all the invoices had the right number, because they all had to have some kind of accounting number to put it somewhere. So, and I learned quite a bit from that job, and pretty much stayed in the accounting world for the next few years, because my mom was a full charge bookkeeper, so it seemed kind of natural that, and numbers just are my thing. I'm really good at numbers. So I went from there. Um, some people out there may remember the divestiture of AT&T and Southern Bell, and at that time I got into the long distance industry, and that's really where my career probably took off. I was in my early 20s, and I saw the potential of like being an office manager, knowing sales, being really good at customer service, like all of these things would propel me to where I wanted to be, which, I wanted to run my own office with a company or something. I didn't want to be the receptionist all my life. I wanted to be the person who, was kind of the head person. And I have underneath my belt, I've worked for IBM, I've worked for Sears and Roebuck, I've worked for Kendall Jackson Wineries, a lot of really major corporations, and did well with all of them. And most of the time, it was in communication. So I felt like my journey has kind of led me to where I am now, because of all the communication, all the ways I've learned to communicate, and all the background I have. Like, I was a tech, so I would run the wires down the wall and put the plug in for the telephone and the computer at AT&T. Was one of my jobs. I mean, I did just about everything they did. They took care of all the communications on site, the company I worked for. So we took care of all of that. So it's just like I got really good at just being able to communicate in every form that there is. We started with profs, which was the early version of email, before email was a thing. We had it with inside the IBM. Like, we could talk to anybody in the IBM world via email, but it wasn't called email back then. And we also had what they called tell, TELL. So on your screen, if you put tell and their ID, like mine was Florida Girl, it would send them an instant message that would pop up on the bottom of the screen. So it was kind of like texting via computers before texting was a thing.
I wouldn't mind that. It's almost like a little reader at the bottom of the screen, huh?
One of the things that really I will probably never forget, I was actually a technician. I was a telephone technician at IBM, and I was on my way to take care of somebody called in saying their phone wasn't working, and I was on my way to take care of the call, and I heard this loud outburst of just people like clapping and woohooing and everything, and I was like, curiosity got me, so I had to go find out what was going on. And I went, and there was like 15 people shoved in a 10 by 10 office, all gathered around this monitor. And they were all so excited, and they were high-fiving each other. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? And they said they had just made the very first motion on a monitor, and it was a parrot turning his head. And it was like 3 seconds long, but it was actual movement on the screen. Or up until that point, that time in our lives, there was no movement. The computer was just words and
Wow.
text.
That's
So I
pretty
feel like I
cool.
was, yeah, one of my
That's
few things that
that's
happened
pretty
in my job I'll always remember.
yeah, that's pretty historic. Even as a waitress, Yvette, you have to be a good communicator. And again, it's another skill set, right? It's another element. We talk about finding certainty. We're really building it, we're creating it, and it has these little slivers that make up for it, that make it up. I've been doing these monologues now for a year and a half, and I'm talking about principles that apply to certainty. I did accountability, and I did balance. I almost chose communication as the C word, and I decided not to, only because it's going to come up in another letter later. But I chose composure instead as a certainty principle. But communication is key, and as a waitress, you're communicating with every customer, and each one's a little bit different. Some are older, some are younger. You've got to keep the flow going. It's just like a good physician. Does he or she have a good bedside manner, right? Or a good
Mhm.
doctor, or excuse me, a good dentist, or a good salesperson, or whatever the case might be. Your business today, which we're going to talk about, we're up against our first break here already. It always goes by quickly. It's surprising how fast it flies by. But your business today is exactly about this. It's about communication. How do we read each other? How do we communicate in a way that we're heard, that it makes an impact, whether it's between spouses or parents and kids or customers and vendors? How do we communicate effectively? That's what the Code Masters is about, right? To become a master at that. And so we are going to go to break real quick. We're visiting with Yvette Simmons-Payne. She's the owner of the Code Masters, which I'm kind of blown away by it. I mean, there's a lot of personality tests like Myers-Briggs and DISC and others like that, but your approach, your methodology is, I think, the best of the best. I think it's the best I've ever seen for several reasons that we will get into here in the last half of the show. So don't go away. We're here on Bold Brave TV. My name is Patrick Laing, and we're visiting with Yvette Simmons-Payne. We'll be right back. Thanks.
Mike Zorek, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zorek, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zorek has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Welcome back to Finding Certainty. I'm Patrick Laing, your host. And my guest today is Yvette Simmons-Payne. If you're just joining us, she's had a lifelong, let's call it a learning experience where she's continued to learn and develop communication skills. She, from a very young age, when she started out at 15 years old out of the house, I mean, that's young, Yvette. It kind of forced you to learn how to communicate better, I'm sure. But then throughout your career, even as a waitress, then as a receptionist, obviously you got to communicate as a receptionist, right? And moving up through your roles, you became a technician with IBM and some other companies where you have to communicate technical details and statuses and things project management and so forth to customers. Those are all different kinds of communication. I think it'd be appropriate for you to share the backstory of how you got introduced to Codemasters, because if you don't mind sharing that story, I know it's personal, but it was powerful. I was affixed. I mean, I was transfixed when we talked about it. So, you mind sharing a little bit, and then let's get into what it is and how it works.
Oh, I love sharing my story because it is so powerful. Um, so basically, my husband and I had gone through a year and a half of counseling, and it was okay for a little while, but all of a sudden I found myself right back where we were, and I was pretty convinced that he just didn't love me. And I was brought up to believe that if you really loved somebody, you want their happiness over your own. So, although I could have stayed tied to a loveless marriage, was that the right thing for him? If I really loved him, is that what I wanted for him? And I got to the point where I was like, no, I want him to be happy, and if it means I have to be the one to start the divorce process or whatever, I'll do that because I really wanted him to be happy. And so in that process, I was like, I need to start brushing up on my skills a little bit because he made really good money. I didn't have to work. I did work, but I could do whatever I wanted. I volunteered a lot of my time. I worked for his mom and stepdad for a while. Just I could just do whatever I wanted because the money wasn't an object. It was more. I don't like being bored. I'm not the type to sit home and eat bonbons watching soap operas all day. So I had to do something that was at least adding value to somebody's life. Making a difference for somebody. So, like I said, I always did something, but I hadn't taken care of myself and all my own bills since we had been married, and it was about 13 years at this point. And so this training came along, and they said, we can increase your sales up to 300%. And I'm like, yeah, it's probably pie in the sky, but even if it's 100%, it's better than where I'm at now. So I was in a MLM at the time called Send Out Cards, and I had a team of about 90, but I wanted to grow that and help my team grow. So I figured I'll take this training and then I can teach my team and we can all grow together. So I walked in, and the first day we always train in bank order. So it's blueprint, action, nurturing, and knowledge are our four. So the first day I learned all about blueprint action. Well, little did I know when I walked in that day, my husband's a blueprint action knowledge nurturer. So I literally spent my first 8 hours of the training learning more about my husband than I knew after 13 years of living with him. But the biggest thing that they taught me was all the ways in his value set and his communication style that he was telling me not only how much he loved me, but that he adored every step I took. I was blown away. I mean, I was literally just like, how did this happen? And I almost kicked the best thing that ever happened to me to the curb just because I didn't know his way of loving me is different. It doesn't mean it wasn't love. It just means he shows it in different ways. And
Yeah, you and I talked about how he was speaking French and you were speaking German or whatever, right? You're just speaking two different languages. We hear about men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and we have these different styles and different needs and so forth and so on. But if the communication is passing and not meeting in the middle, if it's passing in the night, if it's not connecting, that might be the most important element in a relationship. And if it's not working, you're in trouble, right?
absolutely. And my mom always told me the most important thing in any relationship, especially a marriage, is communication. But I did not realize,
100%.
because we were both speaking English, so, what we both thought we were speaking English. I didn't realize that there was 4 dialects within inside the English language. And my husband was speaking the blueprint dialect, and I was speaking the nurturing dialect. and they don't sound anything alike. They are night and day from each other.
Yeah.
So, uh, yeah, I
It makes
knew into that first day.
correct me if I'm wrong of that, but it reminds me a little bit of the love languages, right? Where some of us need words and others actions and service and some people like things, right? It reminds me a little bit of that, but it goes way beyond that, right? It's understanding
Like
not just
that,
what
even the love languages need to be bankified. My own word I
I would.
came up with. So, acts of service to a blueprint are going to be totally different than to a nurturer or knowledge or an action. Words of affirmation. Again, a knowledge wants to hear totally different words of affirmation than a nurture or an action or a blueprint. So even if you know somebody's love language and you're giving them yours, what you would want to hear, it's not landing the same way as you think it is
Right,
99.9% of the time.
right. That
And I've been at this
that
15 years and I've yet to meet one couple, not one couple that is the same communication code in 13 years.
see, and that's what stood out to me when we had this 5 hour breakfast that almost became lunch, sitting in New Braunfels, Texas. You know, it struck me that I think a lot of us have good intentions, right? We're trying to communicate with our spouse. We want to give them their love language, or so often though we're giving what we like, what we appreciate, and in the way that we communicate, because that's all we know, right? That was one of the elements about bank that really hit me, because I think many of us, not all of us, but many of us, most of us have good intentions. We are trying to do the best we can, trying to sell the most we can if we're in sales, we're trying to connect with our kids and so forth and so on. And yet we're kind of, it's like we're treading water, right? We're kicking our legs really hard trying to stay afloat, but not making a lot of progress. And so you went to this course. I remember the story. You went there thinking that you were going to learn new skills so you could get back into the workforce because you thought you were headed to divorce. And tell us what happened.
Um, well, at the end of that first day, I knew that what they were teaching was way more than a sales training, that it was a training that every single person on planet Earth needed to know and understand. Um, so I talked to my husband, and actually, I'll tell the real story. I had my husband come to the training the next day at lunchtime to have lunch with us, and I had him talk with Sherry, who's the creator of the methodology. And she was able to, with her own methodology, able to get my blueprint, who is very budget minded and doesn't like to spend a lot of money on things, um, told basically got to the point where he's like, yeah, just give her the credit card. You need to be a trainer. You need to do this for a living. And so after the second day, not only did I have a whole new outlook on my marriage and my husband, but I had a new career. And I had actually been asking and praying to God um, to help me save my marriage and show me what He wanted me to do the rest of my life. And in one little training that I fought tooth and nail to go to because I've been there, done that, had that T-shirt, He answered both my questions, or both my prayers actually.
God
So
is great,
it's
isn't he? I mean, that's a
my husband
really
actually did the training and became a trainer too. It wasn't just me, but when we
he did.
upgraded, when we upgraded to trainer, um, they they still to this day, I believe they do. If your business partner or your spouse wants to go through with you, it's the same price for one or two.
I
So I
I
told
did,
him that I would do it if he promised to go through it with me, and he did.
and he did, and and it helped, right? Tell
Yeah,
us
because
what the
then
result.
he knew my dialect. You know, he knew that I wasn't like he doesn't say
Blueprint
I love you
action.
that often
You weren't
because
blueprint action
he knows.
nurture
No,
knowledge,
I'm a
right?
nurture actually. I'm a
Yeah.
nurture action knowledge blueprint, and he's a blueprint action knowledge nurturer. So basically, I don't know if you guys can see this or not. That's our first and last were dead opposite, and that's what
Well,
happens 95% of the time.
and let's talk about that. Let's help the listener understand what you're referring to when you say blueprint action knowledge or nurture knowledge. In short, there are these four, do you call them categories or pillars or personalities? How do you define the different groupings of that?
For me, the best way that I can explain it to where it makes sense to people is that we have different brain functionalities depending on our communication style, or our communication style is based on our brain functionality. So we
Okay.
have the blueprints are very methodical. So, and a lot of people think they're OCD, but they're just a blueprint. They do everything systematically. They follow a process, but they do
Step
that
by
so
step.
that balls don't get dropped. If you
Right?
do something exactly the same way every single time, then you don't miss a step.
I can
So
relate to that.
they're very, a lot of people think they're rude because they have one tone. Everything they say comes off kind of very serious. But to the other three, that serious tone can sound like they're being rude. But they're not being rude. That's just their normal, everyday, everything's okay tone. You should hear them when they get rude. um, and they have a very specific set of 12 values that they make their decisions and they live their life by. And each
And
one
if
of
Frank,
the brain functionalities has that same thing. They each have very specific 12 values that they make their decisions and live their life by. And not one value crosses into another brain functionality, value set, whatever you want to call it. So there's 48 values totally out there, and they're all unique. 12 of them are unique to each of them. So when you
so
understand that,
again,
yeah,
yeah, when you understand that, so again, how do you define the four columns, the four pillars, the four the four groupings? Do you have a name for them?
so the blueprints are the methodicals. The action are the people who most of them get diagnosed with ADD or ADHD because their brains are just going 250 miles an hour all the time. They always got someplace else to be. They always got 13 other things to be doing.
Yep.
And they see squirrels and shiny objects all over the place. And it's just that their brain is going so super fast, and nobody has ever taken the time to teach them how to focus. I have a lot of parents that I work with, their aid children, and I tell them, like, you need to, at night, when you tuck them into bed, have a conversation with them. Whatever it is you want to talk about. If you say, what's one thing that you learned in school today? And they tell you. And then to say, okay, we're going to take 30 seconds and just be quiet and think about that. And it might take you a week before they can get through 30 seconds of quietness. But once you get to that 30 seconds, you bump it up to a minute. And you just keep bumping it up in like 30-second, 1 minute intervals until you get to about 10 minutes. Once they can do 10 minutes, then they can do it half an hour if they need it. They've got the basics down enough to where they can continue to grow it and use it if they need to. But they're just, and their set of 12 are completely different than the blueprints. I mean, their
Right.
values are freedom and flexibility and spontaneity and fun and winning and competition. Those are the values that they live their life by and make their decisions by. And you need to know that when you're giving them a sales presentation, especially because if you're talking about processes and systems, you just bored them out of the conversation because boredom is their nemesis. They cannot stand to be bored. So when you get to the nurturing. They are all about relationships. Their relationships are the most important things in their life. Um, their values are teamwork, community, ethics, morality, uh, personal development. I mean, these are the things that they're looking for in your product or service because they want to, everything that they learn and do is to help other people, to help make the world a better place. Whether it's one person at a time, a community, the United States, the planet, whatever. They just want to make everywhere a better place to be. And then the knowledge, their brains actually function like little mini computers. They can take in gobs and gobs and gobs of information when the rest of us have already shut down asking for a break. And they're just like, come on, bring it on. I can take it. And
They're the detail people, right? They want the nuts,
they,
the
they need
background.
and you don't sell them. They sell themselves. Because no matter what I tell them in a presentation, they're going to go check it. They're going to go do their own research, do their own due diligence, make sure that everything that I said is what it is, and they make a decision when it makes sense. And they're the only ones who know when that's going to happen. So you can give them information, but then you have to give them time to do their due diligence, and they'll get back to you. They're the one code, what we call code, that will actually call you back. If they say I'll get back to you, they mean it. It may be 2-3 weeks down the line when they've had enough time to do their research, but they will actually call you in either way. Even if it's to tell you no, they will call you back and say, yeah, no, I don't think it's for me right now. Or yes, I'm in. What do I need to do? And their values are learning, self-mastery, expertise, competence, just totally different than the other three.
So my wife is a bank, just like your husband. BANK. Blueprint, action, nurture, knowledge. Right? I'm an ANKB, right? I go 100 miles an hour. I care about relationships. I absorb a lot of knowledge, and blueprint is the last thing that I enjoy, right? It's the last thing I want. I mean, it's interesting though, because I'm a little bit ambidextrous. I think I have a lot of each of them in me because I am a systems manager. I like steps. I like systems. I like order, right? But I usually go 100 miles an hour at the same time, so it's blending those two together makes it challenging, right? It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we figured out, and we are scientifically backed. The Dr. Ryan T. Howell, PhD, out at the University of San Francisco, led a 2.5-year white paper study on our methodology. And for people who don't know what a white paper study is, because it might be old school, but they basically, a party that has nothing to do with your business or the product takes it and tries to debunk it. So they spent 2.5 years trying to debunk our methodology, and they came back and said that everything that we teach translates out in the real world exactly the way we teach it. The only thing that they did tell us about our own methodology that we didn't already know, we knew your last code wasn't important, but we did not know that it was the death of all sales code. So if you accidentally start your presentation in somebody's last code, so for you and me, that'd be blueprint, you break the sale so hard that even if they want that product, they will go find somebody else and buy it from them.
Our eyes glaze over and we feel this almost visceral reaction, right? Opposition to it. We don't even understand it. I mean, I've seen that happen where I liked the idea, I liked the person, but viscerally, I had this almost allergic reaction to it because they were presenting in blueprint, right? And
you have to think about it too. Usually, salespeople are given their presentation, right? Very few sales people come up with their own presentation. They're giving it to them by their manager, by corporate, whoever came up with it. And most middle management are blueprints.
Yeah, I can see that. Most
Middle management
what would you
is
say most
because
CEOs are? Most founders, where do they fall? Like me.
the like up most CEOs, entrepreneurs, that type are A's or a
Hmm.
combination of NA, because they're doing it either to help people, so that would where the N would come in,
Yeah.
or they're just what to not they want to have and do whatever they want to do, not have any constraints financially, time. Don't want anybody
Yeah.
to tell them what to do, where to be, when to be there. So that's the entrepreneur part of, and
Yeah.
we're very in the United States. We're very AN oriented. Probably 70% of our population is A or N in their first two codes,
Hmm.
which I need to explain that too. So when you were saying you feel like you're ambidextrous, that's one of the things that we found out was that every single person on planet Earth has all four in them. How you line up and how high you are in each one of them is how you show up to the world. And we make all of our decisions from our first two positions. So if I
It's
gave you all the information in action, but I didn't give you any of the nurturing information, I haven't given you enough information to make that decision. I've
right.
got you interested, but I haven't given you enough info for you to say, okay, I'm in, because I haven't fulfilled your need of information yet.
Right. And if you give me a whole complicated, detailed presentation with all the 15 steps and everything, my eyes just glaze over. And to your
Or
point, and this is something anyone out
you
there, anyone who's
leave the
in sales, yeah,
usually
exactly.
if you bore an A, they go play in their mind. They're still sitting in front of you and they're nodding every once in a while to make you think that they're tracking with you, but they're on the beach, they're planning their vacation, they're doing
Working
something fun in their
on
mind.
email. I do that all the time when I'm on a Zoom when I'm answering emails while I'm listening to the meeting because I'm so bored out of my mind. I I can totally relate to that. But to your point, anyone who's in sales or truly trying to communicate with a spouse or a loved one or a child, if you're communicating in their last one, and my wife, if I'm communicating in K, it doesn't matter what I say, it's not going to connect. They will have that visceral reaction, that that almost allergic reaction. So Yvette,
Non-understand.
yeah, exactly. They're not going to understand. They're not going to like it, even if they like you, right? Um, Yvette, we are up against the end of the show already. I told you it goes by really fast. How do
Yeah.
people learn more about you? How do they get a hold of you?
They can go to my website, and actually they can get a free communication style report. You go to thecodemasters.net. That's thecodemasters.net. There's a button that says crack your code, and they can go there and they'll see the 4 cards with the 12 values on each card. Drag and drop them in order of information you need when you're making a decision. Not words you like, but actual information that you have to make a decision. And it'll send you a free report on how you like to be communicated with. And there's also a contact us page. If they'd like more information, they can fill out that contact us page and we will get back to them.
Yeah, you have a class coming up on May 14th. You're going to be doing a Zoom version, both live and virtual. Anyone interested in learning more about that, reach out to us. You can call us at 888-684-3122. We can get you the information for that. We'll also put it in the description for the show today. And you can come and take a whole day.
Give your
In fact,
viewers a present. So I will do 2 for the price of 1. So if they use the code GIFT50, it'll take 50% off. if they're single, and if they're a couple, they can do two of them can come through for the price of one.
That's enormous. That's a 9-day course, all day, guys. Normally $1,000 class. She's giving us $500 off for being a Finding Certainty listener, or you can bring your spouse. And in fact, $500 you can both listen in. But Yvette, thank you so much for being with us today. I think it's a great approach for finding more certainty in ourselves and in our personal lives. So thank you for what you do. Thanks for being with the team last week, and thanks for being here on the show today.
Thank you for having me to all of them. And I'm so glad that David introduced us.
100%. Shout out to David Baskett in New Braunfels, Texas. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the week. Certainty is out there. You can find it, and we can help. Take care.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the Certainty Experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.